So, hello. Welcome everybody. This is pretty exciting. I said, I hope 15 people will come. So this is really great. First, I want to thank the people who organized this and made Kate, Catherine, and Angie organizing this, and Kelly agreeing to be the treasurer, and everybody who helps. Thank you so much. So I'm going to make it official here. I'm Mary Hinnenkamp. I am announcing today that I am running for the Minnesota House of Representatives for 23A. Okay, so I thought about what I should say today, and I thought really two things. Who am I? And so I'm going to start way back, and bear with me because I've lived a little longer than some of you, so there's more to say, and that's just how it is, right? So I grew up on a dairy farm in central Minnesota, a little town near a little town called Freeport, and I remember a couple of things about growing up on the farm. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, any of you ever done rock picking, pick rocks? Okay, it's not a fun job. And so I was 4 or 5 years old, and it was time to pick rocks in the spring because you had to get the rocks off the field. And I had 8 older brothers, so there'd be a couple of brothers on this side of the wagon and a couple of brothers on this side of the wagon, and I would walk behind the wagon and a little pail, and I would pick the rocks and throw them in to the wagon. And then when I got to be about 6 or 7, I got to drive the tractor. But I was really only steering the tractor because I couldn't shift, I wasn't strong enough, and I couldn't reach the brake or the clutch. So I was steering the wagon. And I tell you these stories for a simple reason, that I learned the value of hard work, as I think a lot of us did growing up on a farm. You learn the value of hard work. But also, the idea that you all work together. The common purpose of getting this farm off the ground, everybody working to make sure, because the farm is the livelihood. Without the farm, there is nothing. So everybody worked together. And it didn't matter how young you were or how old you were, everybody works together. And I think that's a metaphor for life now. I don't think we have enough sense of common purpose, that we are all working together for a common purpose. So that story always kind of resonates in those memories with me. So I go off to high school, graduate from Melrose High School, go off to St. Cloud State, graduate with a degree in English teaching. Met my husband there. We get married soon after college, and then I go off. We go off to join VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, and it's a volunteer program, kind of like a domestic Peace Corps. And so we're just placed in this community, and they pretty much say, find out what their problems are and help them. So we go door to door and we talk to people, and we find out that there's no food stamps in the program, in the county. There's a commodity program. And what that meant was if you were a senior, you were a young family or whatever, if you needed any kind of supplemental food help, you had to go down to the courthouse, which could be 20 or 30 miles away. You'd stand in line for a while, you'd have a gunny sack, and they would throw food into it. And it would be canned goods, maybe powdered milk, maybe something good, maybe hominy, and you wouldn't even know what to do with it. And people hated it. They really hated it. They had friends and neighbors and cousins that lived across the border in Illinois, because it's just right along the river, so they knew people who had food stamps. And so we worked very hard with the community group, but we worked very hard, went door to door. We got enough signatures to get it on the ballot. And then it passed in the fall. So that was a really great thing. Not only did it improve the lives of seniors and parents and children, they got fresh fruits and vegetables, they got meat, they got the things they need. It was good for the community because they got this economic stimulus. The grocery stores are making more money. Other stores are making more money. People were doing better. The community was doing better. What I learned from that experience is when you do good for people, it's good for the economy. And I think that's a lesson that's also been forgotten a good deal. So after we finished that was about a year in, and then we stayed another year, and we built a community center. People wanted a community center, And with volunteer labor from the Paducah Community College, which is about 20 miles away, we had volunteer carpenters and volunteer masons, and we built a community center because the community had no community center. And then we left. And so that's, that's that part of my life there. Then Ted and I decided to become house parents, and we worked in group home programs. There were kids who couldn't live at home. Either they kept running away, something was going on at home, there were problems, the families were pretty dysfunctional. So we ran group home programs, and we were the house parents and kind of guidance counselors for kids in the Bronx and then in suburban Chicago. The first one, the Bronx, was with the Sisters of the Good Shepherd. Then in Chicago it was a temporary shelter, and then we did the same thing. We started a program for Catholic Charities in Washington, D.C. And our goal then, because you always have a goal, was to get kids back home with their families if that was possible. So we would work with the professional staff and work with the kids, and that was our goal there. We did that for some years, and then we moved to Minnesota, because by that time I had twins, and it was time to settle down. So we moved to Albert Lea. Ted got a job at Legal Services, and he worked there for 42 years, and he retired last June. Let's give him a round of applause. And we adopted my daughter in 1987, Tess. And I started working at the Area Learning Center, which was the perfect job for me. Kids get behind, as Steph would say, kids get behind in credits for 100 different reasons. For every kid that came, they were behind in credits for a different reason. And our goal was to make sure they graduated. So I would sit down with the kids 4 or 5 times a year and make a plan for graduation and help them to try to figure out what was getting in the way. Were they working too much? They didn't need a different schedule. The teachers were flexible. I was flexible. Some kids worked a half day, whatever it took to get them to graduation, because that was the goal. And we worked together as a team, and my former teachers, friends are out here going, we worked together as a team to get that done. And I love that job. And then there was a reconfiguration in the district, and I spent 5 years working at Fountain Centers as their teacher. And I love that job because kids would come and they would be in crisis. They would be there for 3 to 6 weeks, depending on, what the determination of the judge or whatever in the case would be. And my goal then was, when the kids come back to their district, their home district back home, that they wouldn't be behind in credits, that they would not lose their place in line sort of to graduate. So what I learned from all of this is you follow your values, you work for the common good, and you try to get things done. And that's a good way for all of us, I think, to live our lives. So that's my life story, more or less. Why am I running? I'll tell you, the first overarching reason for me is that you hear it said all the time, democracy is kind of in danger right now. And I agree. And it's not just a matter that people have to be able to vote, because that's part of it. Voting's certainly part of it. But the other thing is, people of goodwill have to be willing to run. And sometimes it's just your turn. It's just time. And so I decided, I guess it's my turn, it's my time, so I'm going to run. 3 issues, and I just want to kind of talk, hopefully not too long, about the 3 issues I really care about, because you need to know, what I stand for, what I believe. I think the biggest issue, from my point of view, the one I care about, or at least know the most about, is education. All my life has been education in one way or another. But I look at preschool education. I think it is very segmented. I think there's kids in Head Start, there's kids in preschool, there's kids with grandma taking care of them or a neighbor taking care of them. They come to kindergarten, and some of them can already read, and some of them don't know their letters or their numbers. That's not a smart way to run things. And we know the first 3 years of life is when the brain develops the most. So it seems to me we need to have a better focus, more resources to spend on pre-K. So that's one of the things. The other thing is K-12 really took a hit during the pandemic. Teachers and schools had to do more with less. And I know the House, the Democratic House, has a proposal to spend more money, in fact, a whole $1 billion on education, which I think is very smart. But somebody figured out for me, thank you, Jennifer, that if the House budget were to go through, Albert Lea Schools would get $3.4 million in increased spending. Now, what would that do? It would keep some of the really good teachers that we have here. And I'm on the Teacher of the Year committee. I know we've got great teachers here. I read those nominations every year. But if we don't do a good job by taking care of them, we're going to lose some of them. That's just the way it's going to work. We have beautiful schools. I think we should be a leader in education in this district. We should be a leader. And so I think that spending that money, I would work for that. I would vote for that. I would do everything I can to make sure we get more money for that. The House Democrats have another proposal: free community college education for anybody under $75,000. I think that's smart. We talk about we don't have an educated workforce. People can't afford to go to college and are afraid to spend that money and get into debt. And the community college is having a decline in enrollment. We could solve all of that. And it would be good for families. It's sort of like rock picking. It's good for everybody. So why don't we spend that? The Minnesota Senate, which is in control of the Republicans, $0 extra for education. Second issue, working family issues. And there's just so many issues, but I think there should be paid family leave. I think there should be a working living wage. I think there should be affordable housing. I think families are struggling and we need to help them. And there are a lot of young families in this community, but all across the state, that need help. So I'm really in favor of working family issues, and I would be very eager to get to St. Paul and work on those things. The third issue is I'm concerned about climate change. I know the people in the other party have been saying, it's not happening. Or if it is happening, it's not caused by people. Or if it's caused by people, it's too late to do anything. And I think that's despicable. So I look at what we can do. I know that there are things we can do. And you can't ignore that there's a problem. You look at the forest fires, you look at the droughts, you look at the floods, these extremes of weather. How can you deny it? How can you deny that there's climate change? But they do. And if you don't look at a problem, how can you solve it? So I'm saying that I think we need to look at solutions that we know can work, whether it's electric cars and the infrastructure to support them, whether it's renewable resources such as using solar and wind and that sort of thing, whether it's incentivizing farmers to plant things more than soybeans and corn because that's how they make their living and they've got to survive. Maybe we support them with some sort of offset so they can plant cover crops and do other practices that would be much more climate friendly. So those are the three issues. And I just have to say one more thing. My mom and dad got married during the Depression. And they had a couple kids, and they were renting a farm. And my dad voted for Herbert Hoover. And Roosevelt got elected, and he heard Roosevelt on the radio. And he fell in love with the guy. He said he not only cares, he did stuff. He had the conservation, corps. He had banking regulations. He had supports for people who were young and couldn't find a job. He had all these programs. And he said, Herbert Hoover is the last damn Republican I'll ever vote for. Because he didn't care. He didn't care, or at least he didn't seem to care. Well, I think I'm a Roosevelt Democrat. I care, and I think Democrats get things done. So that's who I will try to be. So I thank you all for coming, and we have cake. Thank you. Keep clapping.
Yeah, keep clapping.